Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back. It is exactly 9:28 a.m. News and views on Salam Media. And let's look at the issue with load shedding, a stagnant economy, water cuts, education crisis, high rates of unemployment, gender-based violence, poverty, crime and corruption, among other numerous issues facing South Africa. So where does that leave you and I and the rest of civil society? Is this a country on the brink of collapse? How do we bring things together? How do we get rid of corruption and corrupt officials and government ministers, etc.? How is this? Is it possible that civil society could and should get together and save South Africa? Online, we have Dr. Sifiso Falala, founder of an organization called BuildRSA, and I'm wondering if this is going to be our saving grace here in South Africa. There's going to be a conference being held shortly, and Dr. Sifiso Falala is here to tell us all about it. And here's one man who is hopeful about the future of South Africa. A very good morning to you, Dr. Sifiso Falala.
Good morning to you, Julie. I really appreciate the time. I'm hopeful because we have so much that's good. It's very easy when it's cold to think about the weather and to feel the effects of negative conditions. But in fact, we are surrounded by so many positives that we should look at and consider taking them into account when we reflect on the future.
Okay, I've just done with an interview with Dr. Mvuyisi Mzukwa, the SAMA chairperson, about his concerns regarding the introduction of the NHI in our country. And that's something you touch on as well. The issue with the health department, the state of our state hospitals and clinics, etc. It's a huge task. It is huge. I mean, the politicians have done a right royal job of bringing the country to its knees. What are you hoping, and whom are you hoping to get on board? You're talking about a conference that aims to find tangible solutions to tackling South Africa's challenges. We won't be able to move forward. The best plans may be at hand, but we won't be able to move forward if we don't get rid of the corrupt politicians, business people, and all the other hangers on in our midst.
It's very interesting take on that. We've had our conference. In fact, it took place on the 24th, and we had a list of elite speakers that included Christian Duplessis, Lita Kuta, Tandiwe Makloy, Scott Leiker, Richard Njana, Saki Notando, Nomsa Khatebe, and others. We had quite a long list of speakers. And it's interesting to hear people relating to our situation in terms of who needs to be gotten rid of, and so on and so forth. Perhaps the problem starts right there, because what we should be looking at is what needs to be done by everyone. We have societal problems, and they require societal involvement. So we've taken a very broad view on what it is that needs to be done by everybody. If we take the view that a certain group of individuals or a few individuals will make South Africa work, then South Africa will not work. We need to take the view that all of us are equally engaged, and all of us have a vested interest in the well-being of this country. And every little word that we speak and every little deed that we do is significant. And we've come to accept that problem solving does involve getting everybody on board, which is why we had the conference for BuildRSA.
Okay, I do apologize. I thought the conference was still in the pipeline. I'm sorry that we missed it. But here we do have this opportunity to address issues that were raised at the conference. And undoubtedly, you had very many heavyweights at the conference. And I see one of the first and foremost issues that you guys addressed was root causes, identifying them and then deciding how you go forward in addressing those root causes. Because once you've done that, I should imagine half your problems are already solved. Talk to us about it.
Now, fantastic. So it seems that the real issue, the problem that we have is the approach to problem solving. And it starts with education outcomes. One of the speakers spoke at length about how the focus on education is more on 1 plus 1 is equal to 2 rather than on why it should be equal to 2, or one how one can use 2 differently to 1 and 1. So the nature of the education and the outcomes and the focus thereof is not on a use of the education or usable education. So part of the report that will come out of this conference would then be addressed to authorities, giving recommendations specifically relating to education outcomes. Because once we have programs that focus on solving problems, there was consensus that we have far too many problems. And the consensus was around the fact that we see a lot of social unrest, demonstrations, road blockages. People are generally unhappy, and that is as a result of frustration, a sign that they are facing problems that have not been addressed. And the fact that this number of problems that are unaddressed is accumulating, getting larger and larger, is then problematic in itself. So as a country, we feel it's important, it's an opportune time to start even at a leadership level addressing the question of problem solving. Are we good at it? So the one area is the problem solving skills themselves at all levels, starting from leadership in various societies, government, and business. And the other issue, obviously, that played a significant role was addressing inequality and poverty. That took up a lot of time during the conference, where it was felt that as long as you have such a big gap between the haves and the have not had the those that don't have, you will have you will have an unhappy society. So that was discussed at length. And one of the reasons why we have this situation is because, again, of lack of focus on problem solving. The country seems to be, at least that's the opinion of the conference, to have all these white papers, to have all these government public works programs, all these initiatives, none of which seems to be serving the problems on the ground, and all of which seem to be serving the purpose of being a white paper or just a statement of the fact that we are doing something. And infrastructure is becoming a huge issue. It is, I wouldn't say falling apart, but there are various challenges that are beginning to manifest themselves, be it the water, the electricity, the situation in health facilities, and so on and so forth. Then where you started, there was an address around the reduction of corruption. It was felt that corruption was a factor in problem resolution, that there was lack of commitment to resolution of problems because corruption was a big elephant in the room. And so the need to enhance the investment situation in South Africa was emphasized, and that we can increase investment, first of all, by citizens, that we as citizens, we can invest more in our society if it is clean, but also if it has a clear vision for where we want to go. And the final points that we dealt with, you'll be interested to know that we even had social workers, we even had a pastor who spoke about substance abuse and the work that the religious community and society at large is doing to try and deal with the very, very serious problem of substance abuse.
And can I come in there? Regarding
Yes,
substance abuse, we know that it is entangled in very many other evil practices in our country, and that, for example, is human trafficking. Um,
yes.
and obviously, when we talk human trafficking, we're also talking prostitution in a very, very big way. So we need to get rid of all of those social ills as well. I do hope that they touched on that as well. It's the how. You've unpacked the most amazing concepts here, but what I'm wondering is, Have you guys reached the how it's going to be implemented, or is that the next step? And the other very big important issue is youth unemployment.
Yes, so that was raised as a major issue, but allied to that, youth unemployment was the question of employability. If you look at the employment websites, there are certain positions that get advertised for time immemorial. They get advertised, and they're difficult to fill in, especially in critical skills. The education and the outcomes discussion particularly focused on employability, training the youth and equipping them with skills that are necessary and beyond the academic output. So on the education alone, the challenge, the how, is actually to challenge the Department of Basic Education in particular, because it starts there to look at the
Absolutely.
societal problems that we have, and then to try and change the curriculum to focus on addressing those problems. At the moment, there is some kind of correlation between the education content and the problems we have, but it's a very small relationship. That relationship needs to be increased. In other words, where we have a problem of ethics and morality, where we have a problem of parents not spending enough time with their children, and children may be spending excessive amounts of time on social networks and learning bad habits and getting influenced by things like radicalism, which in the end is not good for them. We are saying that we need to fetch them, shape them, and mold them whilst they are still young. So recommendations were made, particularly with regards to education, small business development. For instance, small businesses need to do more for the economy. And in order for them to do more for the economy, a question was raised around what is happening to all the funding that has been done, for example, through the likes of the National Empowerment Fund, the NYDA, KULA, and Zika, SIDA, and all of these development funding institutions. It seems like a lot of this funding does not seem to result in business proposals that are successful, and yet the funding has gone in. So the country has invested a lot in small businesses, but to no avail. So the question now is around what kind of criteria are actually used to decide who should get funding and who shouldn't. And that's where the challenge is. And there are recommendations around the type of criteria that should be used to determine funding, one of which could be success at a smaller level. For example, if one is selling one chicken a week, and then they begin to sell 5 chickens a week, probably there is a track record of success, and such a person is more deserving of funding than somebody who merely has a spreadsheet and a concept. The other recommendation relates to almost a pathological lack of uh, key performance indicators and standards. That when we say we have a department, for example, of small business development, it's not very clear how many small businesses they intend to have succeed. And it's not very clear what the target contribution of that sector needs to be to the economy. So the issue of substantivity and scalability is one of the big challenges, in that we tend to have a qualitative approach and hope that things will work rather than a quantity. So it is felt that our government particularly needs to embark on a system where there are clearer targets for various departments that are run. So yes, there are some solutions, Julie, and they are quite exciting. So we hope that through the report that will be shared with yourselves, some of these solutions can be implemented.
Are you going to go into partnership with government? If not, will government buy into this concept of Build RSA? Because it's important. Something needs to happen. Something needs to get and grab the attention of not only government, but ordinary civilians as well. We need to have a sense of pride in our communities, in our country. We can start small in our own little areas where we live in, show the pride, express it in how we keep our little areas neat, clean, and tidy, how we fix the infrastructure, even if it just means that I take care of fixing the potholes in my street together with my neighbors. That's a brilliant start. So that's a suggestion from my part. How do we move forward? And are you engaging with government regarding this conference and a way forward?
Yeah, the most important part of this is that we need to engage first and foremost with citizens. Government is derived from the citizenry. In other words, the citizenry decides that we are going to elect certain officials based on expectations that we have. And those officials represent the dialogue and the common view in their communities, and their values are also mirrored in the society that they represent. So we hope to convince the public first and foremost and convict them that there's a certain way that we need to approach our problems. As opposed to suggesting that the public echoes what politicians do. It is, in fact, I personally believe the other way around, that politicians echo what the public believes in and what the public is doing. So if we go about our business on a day-to-day basis, seeing, like dumping dirt, for instance, throwing things into the street and littering and things like that, not looking after the infrastructure that we have, in some cases, even destroying it ourselves when we're not happy, it doesn't augur well for the kind of society that we want to build. So we hope to build partnership with everybody. We hope we can forge a partnership with our communities, that they need to get on to BuildRSA. Log on to buildrsa.co.za, open an account there, and start participating for the greater good of South Africa. And we are engaged with government, because our government works with everybody in the private sector and every citizen that is willing to come forward. And we will try also and convict them of the fact that not all is lost, that the future is in fact bright, but we need to have a bottom-up approach. We need to start from the ground and rise from there.
I certainly hope so. The skeptic in me believes that we'll only come right, we'll only see results once Eskom has been fixed. But I guess that is also a big issue, and you guys have applied your mind to that as well. Undoubtedly, a very short answer, as we're running out of time, if you don't mind.
Just apologies, the line did cut. Do you mind repeating your question? You were talking about the skeptic in you. I didn't get the rest of the question.
Okay. I'm asking the question around Eskom. Do you truly believe? I believe that once Eskom is sorted out, we can get this economy really starting to do things for the country, for ourselves and the country as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's not, Eskom is just a symptom of the broader challenge as far as problem resolution is concerned. I don't think too many people still speak about what happened with South African Airways, for example, simply because you're not always flying, but you're always using electricity. It doesn't make it any less of a problem, or the challenges that are facing, for example, Transnet. And some of the other SOEs. So we've got various indicators in our society that should be a wake-up call and telling us, and we need to be humble enough to accept that we're not good at solving problems. And we need to address that problem at all levels. So Eskom will work, perhaps not necessarily Eskom per se, but the energy, the generation and distribution of energy situation is going to be resolved. Eventually, there will be sufficient energy for everybody that needs it. But whether that energy will be from Eskom or from other suppliers is not known at this present stage. But Eskom will no doubt improve its capacity, as it has proven under the current circumstances to be unable to cope with demands for the entire population. So I'm not skeptical about our energy requirements being met. I think they will be met, but I think focusing too much on ESCOM would suggest, again, our over obsession with the one entity, disregarding the others, such as SAA, for example, and Transnet, that are facing similar problems. And we need to really stop what we're doing and focus on our lack of skills as far as problem solving is concerned, because as we progress from one day to the next one, there are new problems that we need to solve, and we haven't solved the ones that we had to solve yesterday, on top of the ones that we had to solve last week and last year, which is why we are reaching a point where we have people demonstrating and being unhappy on a daily basis.
And that's where we leave it. Dr. Sifiso Falala, you certainly are the voice of reason and undoubtedly give a lot of people hope. We're going to be following this and we await the report post the conference. Thank you indeed for being on the show this morning. Go
Thank you,
well.
Julie. Much appreciated.
It's exactly 9:49. We move along, and next we're going to be talking about the 150th anniversary of the arrival of the first generation of the Zanzibari Makua community in Durban.